Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of A Contagious Smile, where every smile tells a story. We have Miss Holly with us today, who is an inspiration and has such a comeback story. I can't wait to get into this with her. So I just want to jump right in. Holly, thank you so much for being in here with us today. I really appreciate you coming on and tell your story.
Hi, Victoria. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's go back into your childhood and you overcame some abuse, and some trauma as a child. Would you kind of tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So growing up, I didn't really recognize at first that my household was different than other people's. It was kind of just a discovery over time. And I recognized that even when I was very young, that I really liked spending time at other people's houses in other environments because they were providing a warmth and a nurturing environment that I didn't know I was missing out on, that I didn't have at home.
Right.
And growing up, I always naturally gravitated towards my teachers as a
Yeah.
source of support and really that maternal instinct,
That
having a
safety.
positive figure.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize that my drive to perform well at school was a way of me kind of trying to earn love and respect from people around me because I wasn't getting it at my home.
Right.
So I grew up in Metro County, Georgia, or Metro Atlanta in Georgia, and I always kind of had a hard time really identifying with my trauma and abuse and neglect because I had my needs met, air quotes needs. I had a roof over my head. I had food on the table. I was going to school. It looked like I shouldn't have anything to complain about, but my needs, my emotional needs, my safety needs, the love and support, the nurturing needs that you have as a child, as a developing person, were not present whatsoever. So it really created quite the conundrum
Yeah.
growing up
Yeah.
to recognize, why am I feeling this way when I think I have what I should have to be happy? Why why do I feel the way that I do?
Right. And then that was your norm. So if you went over to your friend's house for dinner, you would go over there and you're like, everybody's having a conversation with one another and they're participating and there's laughter and it just felt so out of place for you, right? Because that's how a lot of people feel is you go over there and it's like, it's just is awkward because this isn't what I'm used to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, almost like a dissonance,
Yeah.
like a fugue. It's like, am I seeing things correctly? Am I experiencing correctly? Is my mind playing tricks on me? And also, there was a deep wanting to want to stay in that place, to
Yes.
want to do sleepovers, not just like one night, but multiple nights, and constantly kind of wanting to almost be assimilated into other people's families.
Right.
And the odd part was that a lot of friends that I had, the parents in the situation often would accommodate. And looking back, I'm like, oh, those adults probably knew something was going on, so they stepped in
Yeah.
because my parents were always willing to like get me out of the house for extended periods of time.
But did you ever notice that you back then were like, I really don't want my friends to come over for a sleepover because you were almost ashamed to have them come over? Because that's how I was. And I was like, I never wanted people to come over, but I was quick, fast, in a hurry to go over there because it was such a
Bingo.
different environment. It was like you go into their home and it's a warmth and a feeling of acceptance, and they come to your house, which is a difference, and it's like cold and heartless and loveless and just this uncomfortability that even going to school felt better because there was like people actually acknowledging you and talking to you, not at you.
Right. Bingo. Nailed it.
So what ended up going on from there? How, like, what ended up happening as this continued?
Yeah, realistically, like again, looking back at it now, several decades removed, my mother was suffering from probably various types of mental illness, undiagnosed, untreated, and didn't have the resources or the wherewithal to seek treatment for herself my father, as I guess, a coping mechanism, just worked profusely, worked 60, 70 hours a week. So was always out of the home conveniently enough. And the home life was kind of a, let's call it the gasoline.
Yes.
And now life is challenging, life is hard, and life can throw us curveballs. And when I was 16, when I was 15, I started dating a young man and fell in love with him. And I didn't maybe recognize at the time that he had kind of a broken home as well. And we both really, I don't want to say trauma bonded, but we both became each other's support. We were
You
leaning
understood.
against one another. And it
Yeah.
was true love, but it was also very unstable, for what it was, because we were really kind of just providing each other with so much support.
Yeah.
And yet we were both broken, and we were kind of trying to deal with all of that raw emotion. And you know, as his partner, I didn't recognize any kind of signs. But one day he was picking me up from high school, and he would pick me up from high school, and he would drop me off at swim practice. I've always been an athlete, again, kind of like always striving to get the accolades and attention and awareness from environments outside of my home. So I was a high
Mhm.
achieving athlete, I was a high achieving student. Those came very easily to me, even though they weren't rewarded in my household. But my husband, my boyfriend would pick me up from high school, drive me to swim practice, and then he would go to community college. And one day he picked me up and we were driving, and he said, "You know I love you, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he was like, "Well, what the, can I swear?"
Yeah.
Okay. He said, "What the fuck is this?" And he opened up the glove box, and he had never cursed before. And there was a box of bullets. And he said, "What the fuck is that?" And he pointed in the back seat of his car, and there was a shotgun, a 20 gauge shotgun. And I shut down, immediately went into
Of course
shock.
you
And we're
did.
driving, and he's like, "Please," begging me for one last conversation to remember me by. He just wants me to have a conversation with him because he's going to kill himself, and he just wants to remember one nice last conversation. So I am completely mute, in shock at this point. He drops me off at swim practice. I get out of the car, I go into swim practice, where I promptly collapse and start hyperventilating in a
Yes.
panic attack. And kind of like a longer story short, my swim coach at the time said, "Obviously you're not swimming. You're not calling him to come and pick you up. Call your father. Your father can come and get you." So I did that. And again, tried to call my boyfriend. His name was Michael, didn't pick up his phone. Went all of the places that meant something to us. I was 16, he was 18 at the time, and couldn't find him. And got a phone call at 3 a.m. the next morning. Woke up, I answered the phone call, it was right next to the phone,
Right.
and it was his mother. And I said, "Oh my gosh, she said, they found Michael." And I said, "Oh my gosh, where is he? Can I go visit him?" And she said, "You should know where he is. You put him there. He's in the morgue."
What?
That was the first thing that she said to me after I found out that my boyfriend committed suicide.
Why in the Sam crap would she say you put in there? What a
There's
horrible
so many
thing
broken people.
to say.
It is a horrible thing to say. Absolutely horrible thing to say.
That is
And it definitely
awful.
fed my inner critic. It fed that
Right.
voice that has always been there, that has said, "I'm the problem. I'm the reason why I'm neglected. I'm the reason why I'm pushed away to the side. I'm the reason why I don't matter."
And see, they won't take responsibility that they had any action to do with it. Nothing at all, ever. And to say, I don't care if you're 16, 26, 36, 66, to say that to somebody who had a caring relationship with someone, you don't do that ever. Never, ever, ever, ever. I mean, I understand that she's grieving the loss of her son, but
Absolutely.
she probably had a hand in it because you're saying that he came from a broken home too.
Yes.
And I am totally against the whole suicide thing, but You don't call somebody and be like, "You put him there." I mean, that's just like adding salt to an open wound. You don't do that.
Right. And the older that I've gotten, obviously I'm not in that place anymore.
Sure.
Um, I've grown so much from that experience, which was so painful.
Of course it was.
But to understand a grown adult treating a child the way that those adults treated me, it never, I mean, it just continues to shock and awe me.
I'm at a loss. So, what happened after you heard about this, besides the fact that you're literally just dumbfounded? I mean, this is an adult in a physical sense, but not in a moral or mental sense,
Correct.
obviously. What
Yeah.
happened? Where were you at? What did you do? I mean, obviously, I mean, I know you were home in bed, but like, where were you psychologically and emotionally at this point?
Yeah, I was so broken. I was so shattered, um, to where I was numb. I was totally numbed out. I kind of doubled down on my routine and
Mm.
what made me feel safe. So that meant getting dressed and going to school the next day. That meant trying to go back to swim practice. Like I just wanted to revert back to like what was normal because I felt safety and security in my routine.
Mhm.
Um, and that was short-lived because the abuse and kind of the swirling environment and this major disruption to my very broken household was, again, I kind of alluded to it being gasoline already. This was the match that set the gasoline on fire. My parents didn't know how to take care of me before. They definitely didn't know how to navigate this situation. My siblings definitely didn't know how to navigate this situation. And as a result, my parents decided to sign me over to state custody. So
What?
I was picked up by a state trooper, and handcuffed and shackled and taken to a state hospital
But
where
you
I
were
would,
a great student. You're an athlete. You weren't doing drugs.
no.
You weren't drinking. You weren't out running around with the wrong groups. You weren't in a gang. You weren't doing criminal activity. What was their probable cause to shackle and handcuff you? I mean, you're not violent. Why would they come in? That's excessive force.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I never thought about that. They just said, my parents said they didn't know what to do with me. I was a minor at that point, and they signed me over to state custody because they suspected that I was a harm to myself.
Well, then they could like 5350 you and put you in, for a 72-hour evaluation. But good God, there's no reason to shackle you up. And I'm sure you were not you weren't uncompliant when they got there. You weren't like kicking, screaming,
Right,
hitting, making the officers feel unsafe. So what
right.
is the point in shackling you up and handcuffing you? You just lost your boyfriend. Oh, sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
right. I was grieving. I was
Right.
in deep pain. I was in extreme grief. And I truly think that my parents opted for other people to take care of me in this and manage me in this situation than themselves. By removing me, um, I became other people's problems. And again, it was just kind of a doubling down on we're abandoning you,
Holly,
we're leaving you.
you are sitting there quiet. You're not being abrupt and rude and disrespectful. And the troopers come in. You're 16 years old and they shackle you and handcuff you. There's no signs of assault or abuse on any other person in the home. You don't have defense wounds. You have no wounds on your body. And they
Right.
shackle you and handcuff you
Yes.
and take you
Yeah,
out.
I'll never forget that, like shackles, like handcuffed, and then chains wrapped around my waist, and then handcuffed, shackled at the ankles. And
That's,
I had never even gotten a B.
I know you were a straight A student and an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about
Excessive
like
force and
dissociative fugue, where I'm extremely zooming out from my body, right? I'm
right.
trying to make sense of a situation where all of a sudden, rapid, like in a very rapid way, nothing's making sense.
Right.
And I'm being stripped bare.
Right. And the thing is the officers, even if they have like common sense, you're going to say to them, what are you doing? I mean, you're compliant to officer orders. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. You're not being disruptive in any way. And you're not screaming, kicking, yelling, or anything like that. There's nothing broken in the home. They're not walking into a domestic violence situation. They're not walking into disturbing the peace or noise ordinance. They're not walking into anything.
Right.
They're walking into a house with parents that just say, and then I'm so shocked and dumbfounded right now. My husband and I both have law enforcement backgrounds, and that
Ah,
is such excessive force. And
uh-uh.
like my husband is actually, he just walked in here for 1 second, and he was an officer and a canine, and I mean everything. Is that not ludicrous?
That's crazy.
She had just lost her boyfriend. He had committed suicide, and she's a straight A student. She is an athlete. She never got a B. This is like, and you can tell by her manner and disposition. And her parents literally were like, we don't know what to do with you. So they called the state troopers, and they came in and shackled her, handcuffed her waist to ankle, and took her out on a 5350. But she was compliant to every order that was given to her. I was like, have you heard of excessive force? That's
Yeah,
insane.
that's a little much.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, she
And well,
says
thanks for
hi.
valid.
Well, I
Thanks
mean,
for
he came in here to get his phone, and but and
okay.
I would have said no if we weren't recording. But he literally, like, this is what he did too, and he would have never ever done that. That's just stupid crazy. That's more than excessive force. I mean, I would be writing complaints and calling the shift commander and sergeant to the scene. Oh my, that I'm so mad, babe, because this is not acceptable behavior from a state trooper or any officer for that matter. I mean, she had just lost her boyfriend. She was in extreme grief. You weren't suicidal.
No.
And this is what they come in and do.
I'm very curious as what the parents said to the dispatcher.
That's and of course
You
I
don't
have
have a
no
recording
idea,
of the
but I was a minor,
you
She
don't
was
have a
so I
recording
didn't
of the
16.
really have
call
any
being.
No,
rights.
she was
Yeah.
16, and they gave her up to the state. She's a straight A student and an athlete. She's like a parent's dream kid. And then literally she loses her boyfriend, and they're just like, and they just get rid of her. They didn't do this to your other siblings, though, right?
No.
Can I make sure they hear this? Can we make sure that they hear this
Yeah,
recording?
right.
So,
Um,
do you still have any contact with them at all? Good for you. Good. I'm no contact with my family, so good for you. And you
yeah,
feel better about it, right? Because you don't have that negative, toxic drama weighing you down all the time.
that's right. And it took, I would say, 10 years after this incident, just my late 20s, where you touch the fire and you get burned. And
Right.
I started recognizing that I couldn't, like, just couldn't my life, all my other responsibilities, anytime I interacted with my family, it was too detrimental.
Hmm.
And it was either that or something else would suffer because I'd get in such a mental state where I couldn't show up in the way that I needed to, that I wanted to. So, and going no contact, although definitely the right choice for me, it's still hard.
It is hard because you're not them, and it's painful. And if it
Right,
wasn't painful and it wasn't hard, Holly, you would be them. So that just
right.
shows you you're a better person.
Hmm.
So they come in and they shackle you and they take you. What happens when you get in the back of the squad car?
So I go to the hospital and then I'm like on a gurney in a straitjacket and I'm in a hospital for 2 weeks until that's like the mandatory lapse of time until my parents are able to kind of regain custody. Like once you sign, I believe, I'm not sure if every state's different or every jurisdiction's different, but from what I understood, once you sign custody over, you have to wait a requisite period of time before you're granted that the parents can regain that custody back.
So what
So
happened
I
at
was in an outpatient facility.
right. So what happened at 2 weeks?
At 2 weeks, they picked me up and I just went back home and just went back to school. I tried to, I was, stopped talking for about 3 months, actually. I went totally mute, because I was processing at such a level. Like I felt so robbed of everything. I mean, I think disassociated would probably be like the correct term, but I didn't, everything was so loud in my head and yet I couldn't find words.
Right.
So I just didn't find words. I tried to go back to the pool to swim, and I was a nationally ranked swimmer at that time, very high level of competition, which means it's very mental at that point. And I had to stop swimming because I was getting panic attacks. That's the last place that I saw my boyfriend. I
Right.
had a lot of like entrenched memory there, associations. So I had to step away, even though I was getting recruited for NCAA for college scholarships. So it's quite the conundrum. And about 6 months after that, I decided to move out of my parents' house.
Good
So
for
I
you.
was a senior in high school and I just I couldn't be in that household anymore. I felt like I was being a pawn between my parents. And I just knew that I needed to heal in my own way, and healing was not going to happen in that household.
Right. You can't heal in an environment that made you sick.
That's right.
Yeah, you
Bingo.
can't. You can't. It just doesn't happen. There's no way.
Hmm.
Especially when there's no support there either.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you move out your senior
Move
year
out. Yep.
and then you become a world ranked professional triathlete.
In about a decade.
Well,
Yeah.
still you did it. Good for you. I mean, so what did you do after you moved out?
So after I moved out, I finished high school and then, applied to colleges that weren't associated with NCAA swimming scholarships. I had to navigate filling out the FAFSA by myself. I didn't know how I was going to pay for college. I didn't know what to do. I had no help from anybody to take that next step. So I applied to two schools that I thought I would, one that I thought I was definitely going to get into, and one that I thought was a stretch. And that stretch school was Agnes Scott College in Atlanta. It's a women's private college in Decatur. And I waited so long to finish my application that I had to drive it to the admissions office because if I put it in the mail, it wouldn't have gotten there by the deadline.
Right.
So I applied to Agnes Scott College, and by grace of whoever, I got in. So I was able to be a part of the women's NCAA swimming team. There's no athletic scholarships in Division III, and I felt like it was a great place for me to be immersed in school, um, be around other strong, smart women. Again, like being around people that could model that maternal energy for me. And it was a really wonderful experience there. And very hard as well.
Sure.
But great.
Yeah. So tell us where you are now.
So from Agnes Scott College, I ended up going to Clemson University for a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. I had shied away from psychology because, again, I felt like it was too close. I didn't exactly know what to do with a degree in psychology, but I ended up majoring in it because I just loved learning, having words to share my experience, words that accurately identified my human experience and how that could be relatable to others. That was very fulfilling to me. So industrial organizational psychology is the study of humans at work.
Right.
and like personnel psychology. And I was like, oh, it's not clinical. I feel like I might be able to make an impact here. So I went to Clemson University for a PhD. In my studies there, I discovered rowing, and I had a semester of NCAA eligibility left, and walked onto the women's NCAA team, broke their 8-year standing novice record, and was recruited to 3 Olympic development training programs for rowing. So I actually ended up switching from a PhD to a master's and graduating so I could go and try to make the 2012 Olympic team rowing in Philadelphia.
Did you make the team?
I did not.
But look,
No.
not a lot of people can say they even got to that level. Good for you.
Right. I tried.
Yes.
Um, and again, it's always hard. I've always kind of felt like I've had this part of me that was othered because I had such a traumatic experience growing up. And then, going to a place where it seemed like everyone around me had the love and support and admiration of their family. They had financial support from their family. They came from very stable families. And I just always felt like I was coming from behind. Whether or not that was true, that's always how I felt. Like I had to work twice as hard because I had to do my sport and I had to work full time. It was always a both and. I had to take care of myself. I had to find a way that I could survive and still find who I was
Right.
while doing all of those things.
And you are where now, besides a complete success story, and you should be so proud of yourself. Seriously.
Thank you. So from now, I had a couple bumps along the way. I think, and I'll answer your question in a more succinct way, but growing up with trauma and abuse and neglect, it's a long road to healing
Yes.
because I had entered into some romantic relationships with people that made me feel the way that my family did.
Mhm.
And there was a similarity and a closeness there that I was drawn to that was not healthy. And that kind of preluded to domestic violence. But now, through lots of therapy, through lots of introspection, through lots of deep work, I have LLC'd my own business
Good
about
for
a
you.
year ago. I am a coach, professional and leadership coach. I am a sports endurance coach, and I am a consultant to individuals and organizations who want to partner in transformational change.
Good
Good
for
for you,
you.
girl.
Thanks.
Good for you. That's amazing. Don't you just kind of want to like make a flyer and make sure your family sees it and say, thanks, thanks for the support. Appreciate it.
And
It
actually, my company name is Metta Performance. Metta, METTA, is Buddhist for loving kindness, because one of the most transformational processes starts with ourselves. And if we
yes,
can cultivate a sense of loving and kindness for ourselves, we can change our world, we can change the world around us, we can really impact the people that we're in community with.
absolutely.
And it's a beautiful name and it's a constant practice for me because that is the one thing that I did not have growing up. And it's the one thing that I need more than anything is a loving kindness for myself and for others.
Right. And now you're married.
I am. I'm married. We just celebrated 8 years
Congratulations.
on the first. Thank you.
Yes. So you can have your happily ever after. It absolutely is there. It's a lot of work. It's a
It is
lot
a
of
lot of
work.
work, and I never thought it'd be possible. There's been, the voices that get primed so early, they are so strong, their roots run so deep
Mhm.
that it feels like they're a part of you. It feels like they are you,
Yeah.
like that you'll never mount to anything, that you're destined to be alone, isolated, neglected,
Mhm.
rejected,
Never good
and
enough.
exactly right. And man, the sets and reps, if you will, that you have to do to strengthen the other muscles, to strengthen the wise mind, the inner guide, and to
Right.
quiet the voice of that inner critic. It is a practice that never stops, but it is the only way.
Yes. So I want you to be able to tell everybody where to find you. I want to make sure I can send everybody your way. So how do people find you?
So my website is Meta Performance, That's with two T's, metaperformance.com. And on Instagram, you can check out the amazing accomplishments of my athletes on metaendurance.com.
That is amazing. Now, we always ask if anybody wants to give us one of their favorite quotes before we go. Do you have a favorite quote for us?
I do. My favorite quote is strength is not determined by physical capacity, but rather indomitable will.
That's awesome. That's
And that's
fantastic.
Gandhi.
Yes. Holly, will you come back again?
Of course.
I would love that. I would love that. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing your story. You
Thank
did
you.
amazing, and
Thanks.
you are a light and an inspiration to so many people. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you for creating the space. It's
Oh, of
amazing.
course. Of course.